Let's get back to speaking with the enemy. Andy, just talking to Bob Marjanovic about the receiving core of the BC Lions.
Yeah, Moj, can you talk a bit about this receiving core around Vernon Adams? You've had some injuries, but you got Keon Hatcher, you got Alexander Hollins, and these guys, especially in the last two games, have put up some big numbers. Can you speak a bit about them?
You see that, Bubba? You see how Fantuz just kind of steers away from the line talk and goes boom right into the receivers? It's like he knows where his bread's been buttered in the past.
Well, you always know what you know best, right? Come on.
Exactly. That's why I want to stick talking about the line. No, but I mean it's crazy. And guys, I haven't got the lineup sheets in front of me, but I want to say they've only had their starting 5 receivers to maybe 1 or 2 games, if that, this year. Like Hatcher missed a whole bunch of games at the start of the year because he had a plantar fasciitis issue that plagued him through a training camp. And Lucky Whitehead missed a bunch of games with a hamstring. Rhymes missed a couple, came back. Now he's on the 6th game. Katoy's been the only guy. Katoy and Hollins are the only receivers that have played every single game for this team this year. So, yeah, and, the one thing about this group is, like, they don't really care who gets the ball. I mean, somehow, some way, it's going to be someone who has a big game, whether it's a Hatcher or a Rhymes when he was in the lineup or a Hollins. They have a lot of depth in the receiving court. They utilize all those weapons when they have to. I mean, Justin McInnis will get the ball thrown to him in the end zone or in a big situation as well. So, same thing with Katoy. And that's kind of one thing watching Hamilton last week, guys, and I think it really bodes well for the Tiger Cats going into this game, and maybe you can comment on this, Andy, but getting Kerry Godwin back, I think is going to help you guys immensely, because when I watched that game last week, the only guys you were throwing to were White, Duke Williams, and McAllister got a couple of touches. Other than that, it was just, it just seemed like that's who Powell was zoning in on, was just those 2 receivers.
Yeah, well, the Cats we'll talk about in our other segments a bit more. But now let's get to that offensive line you talked about. So who should we be looking at as who's got question marks around their play, and who are the kind of the anchors of that starting 5?
Well, I mean, when you look at it, I think everybody has to be evaluated. I don't think you just kind of single out one guy. But I mean, you look at Kent Perkins last game; he had 4 holding penalties. I mean, and the thing is, it's such a technical position, and I use a guy like Andrew Pearson as a great example. I mean, Pearson, when he is playing with good technique, is a solid player. When he's not, he doesn't have the physical skill set to get away with not playing with good technique, if you know what I mean, right? I mean, it's just and that's true for any position. And Andy, you could relate to this. You've got, some receiver who might not run the best route, but if he's running a 4.40, 6.5, well, guess what? That's going to make up for a lot of things. Same thing with the offensive line, right? I mean, you look at a guy like Pearson, he's not the tallest guy, he's not the biggest guy. So for him to be effective, he has to be playing extremely well in terms of his technique. So I look at a guy like him. Michael Couture is new to this team. I mean, he played the last few years in Winnipeg. He's kind of had, some really good games and other games where he hasn't been as good. So to me, it's the group as a whole. They have to come together, because I think if you look at any position group on a team, probably the secondary and the offensive line, to me, are the 2 groups that everybody's got to be on the same page, because if they're not, you've got problems.
Just coinciding with that offensive line talk is the Lions' running game, which now I understand there is a factor that BC were down in that game in Regina. It seems to be a secondary thought on offense. Am I correct in thinking that way?
Yeah, and I think it's something that they'd like to establish a little bit more as, we get into the fall. I mean, it's imperative that you have a running game that's, readily available and that you can utilize, because you're not going to have the greatest of weather come late October, early November, particularly in Hamilton in late November. Let's get there.
Take it easy. Take it easy.
I think it's something that Rick Campbell and Jordan Matsimic would like to, try to establish a little bit more. And, you get into situations where it's 2nd and 4 and 2nd and 5, and it makes your second down conversions, obviously the percentages go up, and it also helps out your quarterback in that situation, and it helps your offensive line too, right? I mean, if you're in a 2nd and 5 situation, it's not like the defensive line can just sit there and tee off and, expect that it's going to be a pass.
Let's talk about that defense a little bit here. In BC has had arguably the best defense in the league, or at least one of the top ones this season so far. And it's not common in the CFL when you have to have 7 Canadian starters, and most of the time teams would do 5 on offense or 6 on offense and 1 or 2 on defense. Both of these teams tonight have 3 starters on the defensive side. In BC, those starters are leading in the stat category, actually. Matthew Betts on the D-line and Halleck and Lacombo racking up the tackles in the linebacking crew. How imperative is it to have that kind of depth on the national level to build a defense around?
Well, I think anytime you have success in the Canadian Football League, one of the foundations is having really good Canadians that you're putting on the field. And with the Lions, you touched on it, Haladic, Lacombo, and Betts all having great years statistically. But when you talk about the depth, and my first thought when you talk about the depth in terms of the Lions is the depth of the rotation on the D line. Mm-hmm. Losing Nate Cherry's a bit of a hit. We're going to see what Francis Bevy brings to the table today. I know Rick Campbell was excited to see him play their first-round draft pick from Southern Utah this season, but you look at that 8-man rotation, sometimes 9-man when you throw in Archibald, but it's like they just come at you in waves. And the big key to the success of this defense, and people won't really look at it because you look at their numbers, and I mean, Josh Banks, I think, has like 2 tackles on a year, whatever the case may be. It's just like that. Yeah, I mean, those guys aren't putting up huge numbers, but you talk to Ryan Phillips, you talk to guys on the defense, that interior line, they believe Josh Banks is probably the best, one of the best, if not the best, one technique guy in the league. And, they're not allowing the offensive line to get to the next level and chase those linebackers down. And in pass situations, they're pushing the pocket back and allowing the guys coming off the edge to get to the QB like Matthew Betts because the quarterback has nowhere to step up. So to me, it's probably one of the most unheralded groups in the league is that BC Lions interior rotation that they have. They're not going to get a lot of headlines, but they're very effective and a big key of what this defense does.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm sure Matthew Betts would be the first one to praise the guys inside of him for opening him up and creating some one-on-one opportunities for those sacks he's getting. You go to the secondary, you had a lot of consistency, especially in the boundary side with Peters and Lee over the past number of years. I think Peters, 5th year in BC and Lee's 9th, something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, I believe so. I don't have it in front of me, but I think you're in the neighborhood. I mean, Lee's 32, so 9 years sounds about right, and Peters is now, 31, and he came up here, I think when he was 25 or 26. You're in the neighborhood.
Yeah. So Ryan Phillips, you can trust those guys just to handle it on that side of the ball. And then Sales, of course, been in the league, and Edwards Cooper is coming on. Any questions in the secondary or any improvement you see needed?
No, I mean, this is a group, and you talk about continuity. I think there was only one game this year, maybe 2, where Mike Jones came in for Jalen Edwards Cooper. Other than that, this group's basically been together the entire season. It's a veteran group. I mean, Quincy Mosier playing safety brings a payload every time he comes downhill. And, you got Peters and Lee and all that experience on the one side, Sales and Edwards Cooper on the other side. I think this secondary is as strong as it comes in the league. And, the one thing, though, it's interesting, just talking to the guys this week, they weren't very happy with their performance in Saskatchewan. And one of the things they really focused on this week was communication. Now, I don't know if that was an issue because of the crowd noise in Saskatchewan. You wouldn't think so when the Riders have the ball. But regardless, that's something that they're looking to clean up this week. And that's kind of surprising considering the success that they have had throughout the course of the year, that for whatever reason last week, communication was an issue.
Bob, you talk about crowd noise, and certainly there's been an atmosphere really growing in Vancouver. Football fans are on their feet. Is this going to be a tough place to play? I know here the Dome is open for today's contest.
Yeah, it is. And, expecting a crowd of over 20,000 again, so that's good news for the Lions. That's crazy, guys. Obviously, you've seen the news with all the wildfires in BC and, of course, up north as well. And getting into the stadium today, the stadium was actually a little smoky. Vancouver is covered with a nice blanket of smoke as we speak. And, just even in the stadium when I walked in and I looked from our broadcast location across the field to the stands, and you could see just a slight haze. So I don't know if that really comes into play with these guys today. I mean, they're finely tuned athletes and such, so I think they're going to be okay. But Yeah, I'll tell you a little funny story. You talk about the Lions and, the big turnaround and Amar Doman. So I was talking to our old friend Jeff Reinbold, who I've known since like the early 90s when he was up here in BC. And the funny thing with Jeff was he was downtown last night and he bumps into Amar Doman. And he's like, hey, I just want to introduce myself, Jeff Reinbold. Just want to let you know that I'm really happy with what you want to thank you for what you've done with the Lions. It's great to see the buzz around the team and the city. I'm like, hey, are you going to the game tomorrow? Jeff was like, yeah, I'm going to be on the other sideline. So I guess Amar obviously didn't know who Jeff was. Jeff was relaying that story, and I got a good chuckle out of that, hearing that from Jeff. So, yeah, but when you look at Amar and what he's done with the fans here, I mean, there's such a positive vibe with the team. There's such a positive vibe with the fans. I mean, I go on X a lot of times and I'll see Canuck fans saying, "Oh, I wish Amar owned the Canucks." Right? I mean, the most favored owner in the entire city. Right? So he's getting a lot of love from fans, and not only Lions fans, but just sports fans in general, because he's getting people excited about this franchise again. They're doing a first-rate job in terms of their game presentation, all the extra things they're doing around social media. Their team there is absolutely outstanding. And then, of course, you look on the field, they're putting a winning product and an entertaining product.
Well, let's hope for something else other than a win tonight. And I say that with all due respect, my good man. This has been Speaking with the Enemy, presented by Red Tag from the Lions Audio Network. He's Bob Marjanovic, the Moj. Hey, have a great call tonight, and thanks for checking in.
Thanks, fellas. Enjoy the game.